And one of the great things...
It allows us to have 16 times the detail.
All of this just works.
Who's laughing now? Yes, I was in the chess club.
And again, it just
16 times the detail.
Hey, you. You're finally awake.
What if I told you that Bethesda isn't the studio you think it is? That Todd Howard, despite being the face of the company for decades, isn't the true architect behind The Elder Scrolls or Fallout? What if I told you their history is riddled with shady business deals and controversies that could rival EA's most infamous moments? What if I told you that the disastrous releases of Fallout 76 and the disappointing Starfield are just the tip of the iceberg, symptoms of a deeper, more troubling story? Today, we will be peeling back the layers on Bethesda's meteoric rise, the cracks that began to form in their empire, their many legal entanglements, and the unseen masterminds pulling the strings behind it all. So buckle up, it's going to be a long one. The year was 1994. 8 years after its founding, Bethesda was about to change the gaming world with the releases of The Elder Scrolls Arena, followed by Daggerfall in 1996. These procedurally generated, open-world RPGs blended deep role-playing elements with a fantasy world where you could be and do whatever you dreamed. This is where it all started, the lore we all love, the Daedra, the Temples of Light, the Nine Divine, Tamriel. In the first 20 hours of Daggerfall, I became a werewolf, learned how to infinitely fly with Levitate, stole my way to infinite gold, summoned Sheogorath, and cured my lycanthropy so I wouldn't be hunted down the entire game by a lycanthrope hunter. Yep, it's all here. In 2023, Daggerfall received a Unity engine port, providing a fresh opportunity for players to revisit the origins of the Elder Scrolls with improved controls and significantly fewer bugs. Yes, even back then in the 90s, Bethesda had a reputation for releasing buggy games. This updated version not only enhanced the experience, but also reminded players of the immense scale of these early worlds. Despite the repetitive assets and sparse population resulting from its procedural generation, Daggerfall was the size of actual countries, taking hours, even days to traverse. With over 15,000 cities, towns, and dungeons to explore, it offered an unparalleled sense of scale and role-playing potential.
You can choose to manually travel to places. Do you want to see what that looks like? If we were to run this at normal speed, the game just told me it would take 4 hours to do. That was from there to there.
Now, you have to take in mind, these games were janky and with many flaws, but they were ahead of their time, extremely ambitious, and redefined open-world RPGs, standing alongside genre titans like Ultima and Baldur's Gate, laying the foundational bedrock for the iconic Bethesda titles we cherish today. But behind the scenes, all was not as it seemed. Julian Lefay, director of Daggerfall and hailed as the father of The Elder Scrolls, abruptly left the studio in 1998, despite the series' massive success and promising future, citing concerns over the extensive changes in the company's corporate culture.
Everybody left, because nobody would stay there for very long, right? It was just an awful place to work. I mean, basically you came in, they wouldn't spend any money on hiring people most of the time. Well, they got better, but so they hired people like next to no money, and they would push that salary down, and then they would just work them brutally and so on. It was just all kinds of agreements they had to sign, and they could get much better offers from elsewhere.
Clearly, something was amiss at Bethesda. Even before LaFay's departure, signs of trouble were evident. the studio's mismanagement led to commercial failures with lesser-known titles like The Elder Scrolls Legends, Battlespire in 1997, helmed by LaFay, and Redguard in 1998, led by a young Todd Howard, the one and only Howard who joined Bethesda in 1994 just after the release of Arena. And how he came to join Bethesda? Well, I'll just let him tell it.
I looked at the address in the box and realized that the office for this company was on my way home over, it was over Christmas break. So I drove into the office and just knocked on the door and said, I want to make games and I like your stuff and you're on my way back to school, so you should hire me. This is an excellent reason. They said, no. Why don't you wait till you graduate school?
However, these commercial flops failed to capture the magic of the series, and with the low sales, Todd Howard's leading debut in the Elder Scrolls franchise pushed the company dangerously close to bankruptcy. And so, this is where things got interesting. Between 1998 and 1999, around the same time LaFay left due to changes to its corporate culture, Bethesda's founder and co-creator of the Elder Scrolls series, Christopher Weaver, and his new associate, Robert Altman, a lawyer, performed a dramatic restructuring. They split the company into two identities: Bethesda Game Studios for development and Bethesda Softworks for publishing. Under the newly formed ZeniMax Media, the studio managed to survive, but not without cost. Robert Altman, now CEO of ZeniMax Media, was an intriguing and complex figure. So who was he, and why did we rarely hear of him when it came to Bethesda? Well, before pivoting to the gaming industry, Altman was a high-profile lawyer renowned for keeping prominent political figures out of prison. However, in the early 1990s, he found himself entangled in one of the largest financial fraud scandals of the time, the BCCI scandal. This global banking controversy involved an alleged $15 billion in fraudulent activity. Though Altman denied wrongdoing, the scandal left a lasting mark on his career, prompting his eventual shift to the corporate world. Then at ZeniMax, Altman leveraged his extensive connections to assemble what could only be described as a board of Avengers, a powerhouse of political and corporate influence. The board included the CEO of CBS and even Donald Trump's brother. Yet, this new corporate-driven environment clashed sharply with Christopher Weaver's technical vision, setting the stage for a power struggle that would define Bethesda's future. Rumors soon began to swirl. The board accused Weaver of underperformance in his role as CTO. Their allegations effectively led to his termination in 2002. Feeling betrayed, Weaver fought back, suing ZeniMax Media for $1.2 million in severance pay. But his case unraveled when evidence surfaced that he had accessed company emails and documents without authorization in an attempt to find proof of collusion against him. The lawsuit was dismissed, and Weaver was ousted from the company he had built from the ground up. This bitter fallout marked the beginning of a new era for Bethesda, one where ZeniMax Media's corporate priorities would pave the way for some of the most controversial practices in the gaming industry. By 2002, before corporate greed took root, Todd Howard, one of the few remaining developers, took the reins as project lead on the next installment of the Elder Scrolls series, the alien-like Morrowind. Morrowind would go on to save Bethesda from financial collapse, selling over 4 million copies, becoming a critical commercial triumph and a fan favorite among gamers, with Howard as if usurping Julian LaFay's role as the figure, the face behind the Elder Scrolls.
And we went into Morrowind. Man, there were six of us at the time, right? The studio had gotten that small. And I was in charge of Morrowind. But by that time, once you get to that point, there was this element of no fear. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? We could go out of business. well, let's go all in. This is the game.
You see, originally Morrowind under LaFay was supposed to be a vastly different game, closer to Daggerfall, but with his departure and the financial issues, we got a much less ambitious game in terms of scope than its predecessors, and still very buggy and janky. But Morrowind marked a pivotal moment for Bethesda. It laid the groundwork for their now signature approach to open-world RPGs, bridging the old and the new Elder Scrolls, staying true to the philosophy of doing whatever you want and being whoever you wanted to be, but in a more intricate, handcrafted world that captivated players the minute they got off that boat. Todd Howard was celebrated as Bethesda's savior, a status likely approved by ZeniMax board executives. However, not everything was as rosy as it seemed. Howard's leadership and vision would, in hindsight, clash with the original ideals of the Elder Scrolls, first set by LaFay and his team. Beneath the surface, his growing influence and a philosophy of simplification, touching on gameplay, narrative, and artistic direction, was quietly taking root, shaping the company's future.
But like I was saying, we go at it each time with, let's not just look at the last one and say, what does it need? You know, I think most people, most fans will look at it and say, it's great, you should change the leveling, add spears, add crossbows, add this, and add some more races. And I usually approach it from, well, I want to know what skills are superfluous, that we should fold into something else to make the choice of what your character is more meaningful, make that choice more meaningful, and how are the races different? You know, I think 10 races is enough. How is playing an orc different than playing a high elf? Or, you know, those kind of things.
Adding to the shifting dynamics was the arrival of Emil Pagliarulo, a divisive lead writer and designer whose influence on future Elder Scrolls and Fallout titles would spark its own share of controversies.
KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. We are actually at a state now in the development of the studio. We don't have a lot of extensive design documentation. We found that probably after we hit Fallout 3, the design docs that we had became outdated very quickly.
Following a similar philosophy of simplicity, a figure we'll delve into later. Over the next few years, Bethesda skyrocketed in popularity with the releases of The Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Fallout 3, and of course, Skyrim. To put this into perspective, Skyrim has sold an astounding 60 million copies to date, making it one of the best-selling games of all time, spanning 17 different releases across 3 generations of consoles, milked to the absolute perfection. For comparison, Oblivion sold close to 10 million copies, marking one of the most impressive growth stories in gaming history. However, despite their commercial and critical success, and the countless fond memories they have created for so many of us watching this video, Bethesda's design philosophies that would eventually lead to their downfall were slowly taking root. Worse still, their anti-consumer practices and unchecked greed were lurking just beneath the surface.
This is the 27th of last seed, the year of Akatosh 433. These are the closing days of the third era and the final hours of my life.
When Oblivion was released in 2006, the gaming community was in awe at the grandeur of the massive, detailed world presented by Bethesda, staying true to the philosophy of doing whatever you want and being whoever you wanted to be. But just 2 weeks after this massive success, Bethesda embarked on a bold experiment: market test cosmetic DLC. You know it, everybody knows it, the infamous horse armor. The price was $2.50, A bargain for today's microtransactions, but was seen by the community and Bethesda themselves as too expensive, with fans arguing that should cost no more than 50 cents. Others sounded the alarm, foreseeing a slippery slope where games would deliberately withhold cosmetic items to sell them piecemeal rather than allowing players to unlock them naturally through gameplay. But here's the kicker: despite the backlash, Horse Armor proved to be massively successful. According to Todd Howard, it became one of the most successful DLC Bethesda had ever released. As developers smugly put it, you are all making fun of it, and yet you buy it.
Who's laughing now?
A silly idea, perhaps, but one that inadvertently launched a billion-dollar cosmetic industry with Bethesda sitting right at its center.
I think the big thing is the AI we have in the game. We designed this system, Radiant AI, that allows the people in the world to react really intelligently, and they sort of have their own goals, so they can look at their environment around them and decide how they want to accomplish them.
But Oblivion wasn't just a pioneer of microtransactions in AAA gaming. Bethesda's ambition propelled open-world titles forward with a massive leap, not only through its sprawling world and unparalleled freedom, but also its groundbreaking physics and AI. These innovations fueled its resounding success, establishing it as one of the earliest open-world games where NPCs boasted dynamic routines and lifelike activities. Yet, true to Bethesda's tradition of buggy releases and Todd Howard's desire for overpromises, the much-touted Radiant AI proved easily exploitable. What was meant as a revolutionary system often devolved into an unintended comedy.
By the nine divines! Assault! 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 Such violence! Such violence!
This duality cemented Oblivion's and even Bethesda's legacy as a cherished, charming gem, brilliant yet undeniably flawed.
Farewell.
And those lofty promises didn't stop there. During the promotion of Fallout 3, Todd Howard often boasted in interviews that the game would feature 200 or even 500 different permutations of endings.
Well, the endings are kind of, they're dynamically strung together. So the ending number we have right now, if you add it all up, every permutation, everything's like 500.
In reality, players were presented with only 4 distinct endings to choose from, 5 if you included the DLC. But even worse, those same DLC showcased Bethesda's anti-consumer practices once again, this time not with Horse Armor, but with timed exclusive DLC. Partnering with Xbox, Bethesda became one of the early adopters of this practice, locking content away for a time in exchange for a deal.
We're happy to announce that we're going to be doing substantial downloadable content for Fallout 3, and it will be exclusive to the Xbox 360 and games for Windows.
Once again, Bethesda positioned itself at the forefront, not of innovation, but of monetization strategies that often left players divided. However, Bethesda faced yet another challenge with Fallout 3, one that would also set a precedent for their future. You see, in 1997, way before Bethesda took over the Fallout franchise, it was a beloved series of isometric CRPGs developed by Black Isle Studios and Interplay, a series created by Tim Kaine and Leonard Biorsky, legendary names in the RPG world. But by the early 2000s, Interplay was in financial freefall. Ambitious projects like Van Buren, their planned Fallout 3, were cancelled, and their Fallout MMO was barely hanging on. Tim Kaine, Leonard, and many others left years prior, predicting Interplay's downfall to settle Troika Games, but by 2004, a shark entered these blood-infested waters. Enter Bethesda. In 2004, they licensed the Fallout IP, but by 2007, they bought it outright for only $5.75 million. a fraction of its estimated $50 million valuation, which included the Fallout MMO. Bethesda refused this offer, instead allowing Interplay to retain the rights to develop the MMO under very strict conditions, requiring them to meet funding and development milestones. Bethesda that same year then funded their own ZeniMax Online Studios, dedicated for MMO development, one day leading to the Elder Scrolls MMO. As for the original creators, Leonard stated that he was extremely disappointed that they didn't get the chance to make the next Fallout game. We have always felt that Fallout was ours and it was just a technicality that Interplay happened to own it. It sort of felt as if our child had been sold to the highest bidder, and we had to just sit by and watch. By 2009, it was clear Interplay couldn't deliver. Despite a beta sign-up page, the studio was near bankruptcy, and so Bethesda sued for breach of contract, claiming Interplay failed to meet the agreed milestones and accusing them of unlawfully selling the original Fallout games on digital platforms like Steam. The legal battle dragged on until 2012, when Bethesda settled out of court, paying $2 million to acquire the full rights to the Fallout MMO, and with the project officially cancelled, Bethesda secured complete control of the Fallout franchise for a fraction of the original price tag. It was a masterclass in ruthless business tactics. Bethesda secured the bag, saving millions, Interplay's dreams were crushed, and Fallout fans were left wondering what could have been. This case, much like the horse armor controversy, marked the beginning of Bethesda's long history of lawsuits, such as the time in 2011 that they sued Notch, creator of Minecraft, over the game title Scrolls, as it infringed on the Elder Scrolls IP. Funnily, Notch offered to settle the lawsuit through a match of Quake 3, but to no avail. Eventually, it ended in a settlement, with the game's name being changed.
Fallout 3 is garbage, and here's why. The first two Fallouts comprise some of the best games ever. Virtually nothing else comes close. I'm going to talk about what makes the first two Fallout games good a lot in this video, but it's important to keep in mind that even without comparisons to the previous games, Fallout 3 fails on its own merits too.
But the story of Fallout 3 doesn't end there. When it was first released, despite getting 12 million sales and glowing reviews, through its many bugs and crashes, many original fans of the franchise, especially coming over from the oldest running Fallout fan website, No Mutants Allowed, criticized the many changes Bethesda had made, from lore to the emphasis on action over RPG mechanics like player choice, saying it wasn't a Fallout game but something else entirely, blaming the big corporate company and Todd for ruining their franchise, quickly earning the nickname Oblivion with guns. Regardless of what we might think of this modernization, it was an extremely successful and beloved game for Bethesda, bringing numbers that the original creators could only dream of. Not only that, but it placed Fallout on a map of pop culture and even releasing a successful TV show. But over the coming years, if the fans thought those changes were bad or regressive, they would soon be sent into a coma. But for now, in just 2 short years, something amazing was about to happen. Fallout New Vegas is often held up as the pinnacle of modern Fallout games. Ironically, it wasn't developed by Bethesda but by Obsidian Entertainment, the successors to Blackout Studios with many of the original developers. New Vegas, although also very buggy at launch, offered richer narratives, deeper player choice, and a more immersive open world. It built upon the foundations of the original Fallout games in ways that Fallout 3, developed by Bethesda, didn't. Despite its acclaim, there's a tragic story behind it. Bethesda reportedly structured Obsidian's developer bonuses around a Metacritic score target of 85 or higher. Tragically, the game fell short, earning an 84, leading to layoffs. Now, New Vegas and Bethesda are the target of many conspiracy theories, and New Vegas won't be the last. Many claim Bethesda sabotaged the project by forcing Obsidian to develop the game under an impossible 18-month deadline, leading to its technical shortcomings and in turn lower score. That said, Chris Avallone, lead designer on New Vegas, clarified that while the development timeline was tight, there was no intentional sabotage. However, there was mismanagement by Obsidian. So with all of this in mind, by the time we get to Skyrim in 2011, we already had a company that set in motion micro-transactions in single-player games, fueling their corporate greed, shady and aggressive business tactics, anti-consumer practices, and was only gonna get worse. But did people care? No, because Skyrim was about to change the world.
It's, for us, all the little things like you're seeing here, like plants, micro detail, big epic things like mountains, you can walk to the top of that mountain. So we really deal with levels of detail, streaming that in. We have to draw everything, we can't hide it. Being able to look at all these plants, pick up the flowers, we're really big into just suspending your disbelief that you are in this world.
Skyrim set a cultural movement with open-world RPGs and games in general, setting the spark of a whole wave of open-world games in the years that followed. However, beneath the surface of what most would agree was an amazing and now nostalgic RPG with impressive exploration and immersion, fans of the series were beginning to voice criticisms, not just of Skyrim, but the direction of the franchise as a whole.
Borrowing the narrow corridor tricks many AAA games at the time are using, this introduction is out of place in a game where 95% of the time, you aren't experiencing that sort of staged excitement. This shift is most readily explained by the departure of the lead designer of Oblivion and Morrowind, Ken Ralston, and the entrance of Emil Pagliarulo, who created the Dark Brotherhood questline for Oblivion and led the design team on Fallout 3, now as senior designer and writer for Skyrim.
Todd Howard and Emil Pagliarulo's philosophy of simplification finally revealed itself with Skyrim. While this design shift had already sparked some criticism from hardcore fans, starting with Fallout's reboot and Oblivion's more action-oriented gameplay, the trend became undeniable. Oblivion had already streamlined many Morrowind's elements, such as removing some skills, introducing quest markers, and also implementing the universally disliked level scaling system, which created a host of issues with progression. But Skyrim took these ideas even further, tenfold. Remember the beginning of the video?
Let's not just look at the last one and say, what does it need? I think most fans will look at it and say, it's great, you should change the leveling, add spears, add crossbows, add this, and add some more races. And I usually approach it from, well, I want to know what skills are superfluous, that we should fold into something else.
Gone was the class system and many of the deep progression mechanics, replaced by a more streamlined approach inspired by Fallout. Attributes were stripped down, and the game leaned even more into action RPG territory rather than classic role-playing elements of the past. Clearly, from a business perspective, this was the right call. Skyrim brought millions of new players into the Elder Scrolls universe, and ultimately, whether this was an improvement or a downgrade comes down to player preference, much like the Fallout debate. However, players also noticed a shift away from the open-ended sandbox-style gameplay that once defined the series. Instead of the world being the true centerpiece, Skyrim increasingly centered around the player, designed to guide them, the players, forward with minimal resistance. More of a curated theme park of attractions instead of a dynamic role-playing sandbox of the past.
For every good addition or tweak to the controls or formula I felt the game aced, I can think of 3 others that were simplified, dumbed down, or completely removed. At this point, it seems like Bethesda is treating their series like a zero-sum game, where you can only add a system or feature if you cut another. A far cry from the aspiration of the earlier Elder Scrolls games to achieve something greater that has never been experienced before. It seems that in the minds of many regulars, the series has already peaked, and that is one mountain Todd Howard's team hasn't been able to climb.
For better or worse, Skyrim went on to influence games for the next decade through many different releases and even remasters, double-dipping on their most die-hard fans while stuffing the deep pockets of ZeniMax. And then of course, we can't go forward without mentioning the mods. Since Morrowind, the community had taken upon themselves to fix Bethesda's flaws, like patching its many bugs, improving gameplay, and even creating entirely new content, cementing the not-so-healthy mindset, mods will fix it. But with Skyrim, the modding scene exploded, leading to an endless stream of new additions, some of which are still being developed to this very day. This modding boom not only enriched the game, but also laid the groundwork for something else, something Bethesda would soon exploit. Ultimately, this level of success convinced Bethesda and ZeniMax that they had found the perfect formula, but as we'll soon see, it wouldn't last. Around the massive success of Skyrim and previous titles, Bethesda entered what I like to call Bethesda 2.0, or rather 3.0, a strange new era marked by ambition and a shift in priorities. Bethesda, ZeniMax, began to expand aggressively, emphasizing their role as a publisher rather than just a developer. Like a kraken extending its tentacles, Bethesda went on a buying spree, acquiring a roster of talented studios, from id Software to Machine Games. Behind the scenes, however, Bethesda's growing influence and control over these studios began to reveal the darker side of the company once more.
You're not going to like what I have to say next.
Remember Prey from 2017? Some of you will, some of you probably won't, but Prey, or rather more specifically its IP, is a clear example of Bethesda's and ZeniMax's darker practices. Rewinding to 2009, ZeniMax had acquired the Prey IP from 3D Realms. At the time, Human Head Studios, the developers of the original 2006 cult classic Prey, was working on a sequel. By 2011, Prey 2 seemed to be on track, with a promising trailer capturing the attention of fans and media alike. By early 2012, development mysteriously stalled, with Bethesda claiming the game was delayed due to quality concerns. Human Head Studios, however, had a very different story. According to a developer on the project, Bethesda pulled the plug on what was described as a nearly complete game for reasons they called petty and political. By 2013, the Prey IP had been handed off to Arcane Studios for a reboot. Strange. Later, reports suggested that Bethesda stopped funding Prey 2 and marked development milestones as failed, allegedly putting Human Head Studios in an impossible position. When the studio refused a buyout offer from Bethesda at a quote, sweet price, fearing they would lose creative control, Bethesda simply waited out for the studio's contractual rights to expire, securing the Prey IP for Arcane without having to spend any more dollars on Human Head's version. Human Head Studios was left unable to recover, eventually shutting down years later. But the story doesn't end there. Human Head Studios didn't just close in 2019, they were picked up by Bethesda and turned into Roundhouse Studios. They ended up acquiring it anyway and all of its assets in secret, leading to a very weird $100 million lawsuit by Ragnarok Games for claiming both Human Head and Bethesda conspired to sabotage Ruin 2, an RPG that Human Head released just before its closure, with Ragnarok Games being its publisher, as allegedly posed a threat to the Elder Scrolls. Prey, on the other hand, was rebooted in 2017 with Arcane Studios, but wasn't without issues. Some theories online claim Bethesda forced the purchase of other studios in the likes of Human Head, pushing them to a corner. But in personal messages with Rafael Colantonio, Arcane's founder, it clearly states that wasn't the case. The main issue was with the Prey IP itself, as initially they were reluctant to take it as it made no sense for the game they were making.
I'll admit it, I think that I was a little at odds with some of the management When the decision of calling Prey, that was very, very hurtful to me. That was
okay, right.
I did not want to call this game Prey, and I had to say I wanted to anyway in front of journalists, which is not my type. Yeah, I hate to lie. Not only me, but nobody in the team wanted to call this game Prey. Our game had nothing to do with Prey, but it was kind of like Prey anyway, it's a sales mistake because we didn't get the backfires from
the people who want the Prey made from the start.
In the end, they produced a critically acclaimed title, but one that didn't achieve the commercial success that they had hoped for, clearly making ZeniMax executives quite unhappy. So things took an even worse turn. Fast forward to 2023, Arcane then released Redfall.
And it already crashed. Okay.
Oh, here's the boss, Curator Gould. I killed her immediately.
Technically, Redfall is busted. From a design perspective, it's amateurish. It's clearly woefully unfinished. It's sold for $70 or more if you buy the deluxe editions, yet it has less polish and presentation than that of $20 indie games. It was unscrupulously marketed by Bethesda. It is just an absolute catastrophe of a video game by every single metric, and it sits alongside the likes of Fallout 76 and Anthem as one of gaming's biggest disappointments and cautionary tales.
The studio that once brought us the greats like Dishonored or even Prey seemed to suddenly be incapable of producing a functional title. A title that was completely out of pocket with its development history. But was the studio truly to blame here? Evidently, no, because reports later surfaced that Arcane didn't want to make Redfall in the first place. In 2017, a few months after Prey released, studio founder Rafael Colantonio left Arcane, and by 2024, he openly voiced his reasons for departing, stating that Bethesda did not want to do the kinds of games that they wanted to make. You see, there was an issue. Post their initial success with games like Doom, many Bethesda single-player games and IPs were disappointing in sales. Corporate Bethesda, ZeniMax, then thought by shifting to live service and multiplayer games would push revenue higher. It's the reason we got titles such as Wolfenstein Youngblood, Redfall, and, as you will soon see, Bethesda's biggest disaster. However, this creative misalignment later took its toll during the development of Redfall specifically, with over an insane 70% of the original staff reportedly leaving the studio before the project's completion. It was yet another example of Bethesda's and ZeniMax mismanagement, and in the case of Human Head, aggressive manipulative tactics, leaving behind a trail of studios that lost independence, struggled creatively, or were simply shuttered. They even went to the trouble of threatening an indie Kickstarter studio for the name Prey for the Gods, claiming infringed on their Prey trademark. But back at Bethesda Game Studios, they had one more game up their sleeves in 2015, one that would pave the way for some of their most infamous and anti-consumer practices yet.
Let's go, pal.
Riding on the monumental success of Skyrim, Fallout 4 was hyped to no end. Most of these previous controversies went under the radar at the time, and so fans were eager to see what Bethesda could achieve with next-generation technology, especially with the introduction of the new settlement building system, a feature that Todd Howard fueled further with his signature brand of enthusiasm and memory.
And one of the great things about having a fully dynamic game engine is all of this just works. All right, so the generators will power things through switches that require power, lights and other items, and then you run wires that connect them all, and again, it just works.
Upon release, Fallout 4 proved to be a massive success, selling over 25 million copies and receiving near-perfect reviews across the board. Bethesda's winning streak seemed unstoppable. At its core, Fallout 4 felt like a natural evolution of Fallout 3, a generational improvement in exploration and combat, but it lacked true innovation.
Another settlement has sent word that they need our help. I'll mark it on your map.
Many fans saw it as a further step backwards when compared to New Vegas and the originals, particularly in its role-playing elements. Criticism largely centered on the game's dialogue system and writing quality.
And so the scheme we had for dialogue was actually really simple. You know, if you look at it, and this translates to the PC, to mouse and keyboard as well, but if you look at a standard controller, the general gist was, A would be a positive response, X would be a neutral response, B would be a negative response, and Y would be a question. Okay?
Emil Pagliarulo had risen since Fallout 3 to become both lead designer and writer of Bethesda's titles. Following his philosophy of simplification and by introducing a voice protagonist, Bethesda's writing quality not only suffered, but also streamlined dialogue, which drastically limited player choice. Quests that once offered 5 or 6 unique ways to proceed in earlier titles were now reduced to yes, no, or sarcastic responses.
If you're here to talk me into working on Liberty Prime, you can forget it.
What changed your mind?
Nothing changed my mind. I promised you I'd return to the Brotherhood, and I've kept my end of the bargain.
Do I need to remind you why you made that promise in the first place?
No, that won't be necessary. Tell Proctor Ingram to get her scribes ready.
Beyond the gameplay, the cracks in Bethesda's creation engine were also becoming impossible to ignore. Bugs, janky animations, and awkward interactions, hallmarks of Bethesda's games, were still present in 2015. By this point, players began to lose patience. What had once been viewed as Bethesda's quirky charm now felt outdated and inexcusable. Criticism of the aging engine became far more vocal, with fans calling for a much-needed upgrade, especially when open-world games like The Witcher 3 were released that same year. But did Bethesda listen? Well, they didn't. They set their sights on yet a new prize. They were about to hit the beloved modding community. On April 23, 2015, just months before Fallout 4 release, Bethesda, in collaboration with Valve, introduced the idea of paid mods through Steam's workshop for Skyrim and in a future Fallout 4. On the surface, it was marketed as a way for the modding community to earn revenue for their work. A noble-sounding idea. After all, the community was deeply entangled with Bethesda's games. But that quickly unraveled under scrutiny, much like horse armor before it. The revenue split was where things took a truly absurd turn. 75% of the profits would go to Valve and Bethesda, while the modders, the very people creating the content, would receive a mere 25%. Backlash was overwhelming. The gaming community erupted, voicing concerns from ethics, the future quality of mods, and of course, the revenue split. This is going to be one of the biggest industry mistakes ever. The consequences are going to be disastrous in the long term. The backlash wasn't just mean comments or review bombing, it was creative. Players began mocking the system by uploading joke mods like an extra apple priced at $35. The sheer absurdity of it became symbolic of the larger problem.
I mean, we've already had drama within the modding scene where modders borrow content from other mods, compilation mods for instance. What on earth ends up happening if that starts to get monetized? Jesus, the amount of conflict that's going to be involved there. The long-term monopolistic implications of this are potentially disastrous, but simultaneously the power is in the hands of the consumer.
Over the following days, the situation escalated into what felt like a battleground of the century between Bethesda, Valve, and the gamers. A petition opposing paid mods quickly gathered over 130,000 signatures. The pressure became impossible to ignore, and less than a week later, the system was shut down. Gamers chanted their victory, but Bethesda wouldn't go so quietly into the night. Remember DLCs? While controversies surrounding them didn't end with Fallout 4, this time Bethesda found themselves facing even greater backlash, including a class action lawsuit. When Fallout 4 was announced, Bethesda offered a season pass that promised access to all future DLC for the game, and later in 2017, Bethesda, still eager to capitalize on the idea of paid mods, introduced the Creation Club for both Fallout 4 and Skyrim. What is the Creation Club? Good question.
Introducing Creation Club, a collection of new game content for Skyrim and Fallout 4, including new weapons, new armor, new outfits and accessories, new crafting and housing features, even new gameplay enhancements. Using Creation Club is easy. Browse the selection in-game by category and use credits to download right there.
Put simply, it was Bethesda's way of rebranding paid mods, without actually calling them paid mods. Instead, Bethesda presented it as a platform for creations, or mini DLCs, with Bethesda themselves as well as external developers, the community, creating content. To purchase said content, players used Creation Club credits, which were only obtainable with real money. In essence, Bethesda had engineered a system with near infinite horse armors, all under their control. While fans voiced their frustrations, the outcry wasn't as intense as before, and as a result, the Creation Club stuck around even to this day, albeit not without controversy. It wasn't long before the legal complications began. Attorneys from the X-Law Group argued that the Creation Club content, purchased with credits which were themselves bought with real money, constituted DLC. This sparked a significant problem. The Fallout 4 Season Pass had promised all future DLC. Creation Club content, despite functioning as DLC, was not included under the Season Pass. This led to allegations of false advertising, and a class action lawsuit was filed against Bethesda, arguing that they had misled consumers by monetizing content outside of the Season Pass agreement. While some view this as a gray area, and technically mini DLC is not actual DLC, and yes, this is something that the head of marketing, Pete Hines, actually said. Regardless, the legal challenge persisted, yet as late as 2021, no significant updates on the case have emerged, leaving its outcome and Bethesda's accountability uncertain. But Bethesda did not stop producing games and angering the gaming community. In 2018, they were in for a rude awakening, one that involved multiplayer chaos, a broken launch, and perhaps Bethesda's most infamous misstep to date.
In Vault 76, our future begins.
Fallout 76, the game that was supposed to be what Fallout fans dreamed of for nearly a decade. Or so Todd Howard promised.
It is 4 times the size of Fallout 4. And this time it features all new rendering, lighting, and landscape technology. It allows us to have 16 times the detail and even view distant weather systems across the map. I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs. All of this just works. It's not, I'm not kidding.
Released in 2018, Fallout 76 turned out to be an unfinished, unpolished disaster. It launched with game-breaking bugs, rampant exploits, duplication glitches, and a baffling lack of basic features like a voice or text chat.
And none of this crossed their minds since they couldn't even be bothered to put in a fucking push-to-talk feature at launch!
Even worse, Bethesda fixed the poor NPC and dialogue quality of Fallout 4 by simply removing NPCs entirely.
A game with no NPCs, no narrative, no meaningful RPG, no hub areas, no real gameplay loop. It reduces the franchise to a dull looter shooter where the loot is literally garbage and the shooting is absolutely terrible. It's the least amount of effort or design work that you could put into this and still call it Fallout.
The media and gamers' backlash was reaching a point of no return. The most egregious issue, though, was its monetization. You see, despite being a full-priced game, it didn't matter for how cheap it was discounted or even given away, as it was filled with micro-transactions, including absurdly overpriced items in the Atomic shop, such as an $18 microtransaction for a single skin. There was a solution to all of this, of course: mass refunding and let it all burn. And as it turns out, Bethesda reportedly offered refunds after 24 hours. But as the word quickly spread, Bethesda, seeing the influx of emails, started refusing said refunds, simply stating it is not eligible, leading to yet another class action lawsuit for effectively false advertising. Adding insult to injury to its claims of false advertising, Fallout 76 special $200 Power Armor Edition promised a premium canvas bag, but players ended up receiving a cheap nylon bag instead. When fans reached out, Bethesda's support team delivered this now infamous response: "We are sorry that you aren't happy with the bag. The bag shown in the media was a prototype and was too expensive to make." The situation escalated when it was discovered that the canvas bags did exist. They had simply been given to influencers promoting the game months before.
Fancy backpack here.
Sorry?
This fancy backpack here, and I'm just filming.
Fancy backpack. We got this fancy backpack here.
In response to the outrage, Bethesda offered affected players 500 atoms, approximately $5 of in-game currency. That will surely make them happy, but ironically, it wasn't even enough to buy a Millman skin that came with its own canvas bag. But it gets worse. When Bethesda finally agreed to produce replacement canvas bags, their website, true to Bethesda's buggy reputation, leaked personal data. Hundreds of affected customers reported seeing support tickets from other people, containing emails, credit cards, and personal addresses. Fallout 76 was an abject failure in every possible way, an embarrassment that burned through any goodwill Bethesda had left. It didn't just anger fans, it turned Bethesda into a meme, a cautionary tale of corporate greed and mismanagement in pursuit of a live service goldmine. To make matters worse, Pete Hines, the head of marketing, was often seen dismissing community questions and concerns, failing to engage with its players, even stating that fan criticisms won't define what we do, effectively saying we are making a product that our consumers don't like, so we won't change anything and expect that they buy it anyway. He left Bethesda in 2023. But the communication breakdown wasn't limited to Hines. The same problem happened internally. Remember Emil? Once again serving as one of the lead designers and writers, Emil was criticized by former developers. In a report from Kotaku, it was claimed that Emil didn't seem to want to be involved with the product at all. He didn't want to have any contact with it or read anything that we put in front of him. Emil never responded to these comments. As for Todd Howard, he was equally quiet, but eventually opened up about Fallout 76, responding 1 year later.
We knew we were going to have a lot of bumps. That's a difficult development. A lot of those difficulties ended up on the screen, and we knew, hey, look, this is not the type of game that people are used to from us, and we're going to get some criticism on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of that very well-deserved criticism. There's a period once you launch. It's not how you launch, it's what it becomes.
Effectively saying they knew it was going to be bad, but could fix it later, and that was technically true. Fallout 76 has improved significantly in recent years. It now holds mostly positive reviews on Steam, thanks to ongoing updates. However, the game is still heavily monetized, featuring microtransactions and an optional subscription service on top of its buy-to-play model. This subscription, Fallout First, became hilariously infamous when a fan preemptively trademarked the name, creating a mock website that satirically highlighted Fallout 76's many flaws in all their glory. Ultimately, Bethesda banked on fans' love for its games that they would forgive and forget. Just like before, mods will fix it, but for many fans, the damage was already done. With the backlash from Fallout 76 still fresh, Bethesda desperately needed a win. So at E3 2018, Todd Howard took to the stage to announce not one, but two major projects: the mythical Elder Scrolls 6 and Bethesda's first new IP in over 25 years. Not only that, was the first ever new IP designed under Todd Howard's leadership and Emil Pagliarulo. Remember, the Elder Scrolls was taken over and Fallout was bought from Interplay. The game? A sci-fi RPG called Starfield. The concept of a Bethesda space game was enough to ignite imaginations. Fans dreamed of an open-world RPG set among the stars. A blend of No Man's Sky exploration and Skyrim-style gameplay. Perhaps a return to Daggerfall's procedural generation. The possibilities felt endless. But then Bethesda went silent, leaving Starfield's development shrouded in mystery for the next 3 years, while Bethesda quietly released mobile games, some of which sparked lawsuits because why not? Then, in September 2020, Microsoft announced plans to acquire Bethesda and all their IPs for $7.5 billion. While concerns about exclusivity were raised, many viewed it as a positive move, from Game Pass to hoping Xbox boss Phil Spencer could rein in Bethesda's quality control. By 2021, the deal was finalized. Todd Howard stayed on as Bethesda's game studio's director, stating that he was hopeful that launches like Fallout 76 wouldn't happen again with a better testing process under Microsoft.
76, while you mention it, is something where it's another sort of point in my mind with our relationship where when that game launched, you know, the litany of issues we had, and we let a lot of people down, and well, there was very little we didn't screw up, honestly. And one of the people that I called was Phil. I think it's great to have all of these games under one umbrella. Like, what does that mean at the end of the day to the games you're looking at? It's, for us, they're gonna be even better than the way we were gonna be doing them.
As for ZeniMax, Robert Altman, the man behind the curtain, the CEO that many could attribute to Bethesda's practices, had passed away a month before the deal was finalized, with other board members such as Robert Trump also passing away in 2020. The board had crumbled and with the acquisition was consequently dissolved. Quickly after, Starfield was delayed, but gamers took it as a good sign. Perhaps Microsoft was giving Bethesda extra time to polish the game. Hype soared yet again with cinematic trailers showcasing planet exploration and combat.
You can land into Atlantis, but you can also land and explore anywhere on the planet. And it's not just this planet, it's all the planets in the system. From barren but resource-heavy ice balls to Goldilocks planets with life. And not just this system, but over 100 systems. Over 1,000 planets, all open for you to explore. We can't wait to see what you find.
Even Phil Spencer seemed excited.
Super excited. I am. So I think I'm on my 15th playthrough. I'm probably 200 hours in, but not on one playthrough.
September 2023, Starfield's release day arrived, but when most players finally got their hands on the game, disappointment was immeasurable.
I've been waiting a long time to play another true Bethesda RPG. I don't think it's a bad video game, but it is quite mediocre, and it runs its course way quicker than any of the other Bethesda RPGs I've played. It was also very controversial. I mean, a lot of people love it, others really hate it.
There really isn't anything overly ambitious about this game. Procedurally generated, soulless, empty worlds to explore isn't fun.
It is an open world exploration game with little to no actual meaningful exploration. It is a glorified looter shooter that is still catching up to games that are now old enough to be in high school. And it is a role-playing game with so few meaningful roles to actually play and relationships to engage with.
Instead of the freewheeling space adventure fans expected, they found a game bogged down by gated exploration and lifeless, procedurally generated content. A return to the past, but done poorly. The sense of freedom and adventure, the heart of Bethesda's open-world formula, was missing. Bethesda's support team didn't help matters either, as players received copy-paste responses to negative reviews, adding fuel to the fire. And of course, Bethesda delivered on their age-old tradition, bugs, glitches, and an engine that feels like it belongs in 2010. But don't worry, mods will fix it. Looking at the numbers, Starfield wasn't an outright failure. It peaked at 330,000 concurrent players on Steam and reportedly hit 12 million players, including Game Pass users. Compared to Bethesda's past successes, and even Fallout 76, which had 17 million players by the end of 2023, it clearly fell short. But it wasn't over. Things took an even worse turn when lead designer and writer Emil Pagliarulo came to the game defense, claiming how hard video game development was, sparking a debate and many YouTube videos about his role and incompetence as a writer, and in particular, for blaming gamers.
You think I give a fuck about your problems as a game developer? You brought out a game that didn't even have a fucking map for a city. You go through a loading screen to do anything in the game. Like, I don't care about game development problems. And also, if it's a game development problem, then why do other game developers not have the problem? So don't blame other people for being mad at you for choosing to use a system that's bad. What are we talking about? I know they're trying, but it's not good enough.
And it didn't stop with the game's release. After the DLC Shattered Space released to again poor community reception, reaching a mostly negative, Emil blamed fans' expectations yet again. Maybe it's a game of expectations. Fans want a lot, and we do all we can to accommodate them. When you blame your customer, you know you have your bearings in the right place. A practice that seems common at Bethesda. He has since deleted his Twitter, X. This left many to claim that Emil is yet another face of Bethesda's downfall, partially to be blamed for Fallout 76, Fallout 4, Starfield, and the decrease in quality of writing since Fallout 3. If Bethesda was a river, Todd Howard is the bottleneck, and Emil Pagliarulo is the man pissing in the river, claiming it's champagne. Starfield proved to be a disappointment more than a failure, a game that should have been greater than what it was. While patches have improved its standing to a mediocre, mixed rating, the magic that made Skyrim a cultural phenomenon in 2011 and all games before it feels long gone and forgotten, with many developers since leaving the studio embracing smaller or indie titles.
You know, our target audience is us. You know, someone said, well, who's the model guy outside the office? And I say, he's the guy who goes to the game store every week and goes, what's cool? You know, that's those people we're making the game for.
And with that, we come to the end. The story of a company entrenched in mismanagement, greed, and stagnation, even regression when it comes to design. Bethesda's once revolutionary vision has gradually faded, while games like The Witcher 3, Kingdom Come Deliverance, and Red Dead Redemption 2 have redefined open-world gaming, creating living reactive worlds. Bethesda is still playing catch-up. once hailed as bold innovators with grand ideas.
And I was in charge of Morrowind, but by that time, once you get to that point, there was this element of no fear. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? We could go out of business. Well, let's go all in. This is the game.
Bethesda now seems content to simplify, recycle, and milk its beloved IPs, expecting fans to keep buying their half-baked products. Then there's Todd Howard. Once seen as just another gamer, he, along with Emil Pagliarulo, have become the face of Bethesda's decline. But even more concerning, as of 2024, retired developers have revealed that Howard has become the gatekeeper of Bethesda's creative direction, where every decision must pass through him.
Which means that one of the issues that the studio struggled with occasionally was, well, we can't move forward because Todd hasn't had a chance to look at it. Now, obviously, this wasn't something that was, completely a blocker because the games got produced on time.
Whether the studio simply grew too large for its own good, buried in bureaucracy and red tape, or Howard's leadership has declined over time, one thing is clear. Nothing will change in Bethesda's future games unless there's a shift in management and leadership. This brings us to Bethesda and ZeniMax as a company. The once beloved studio for the gamers, a scrappy indie operation at heart, has crumbled under the weight of corporate greed and mismanagement. Over the decades, Bethesda and its parent company ZeniMax demonstrated a troubling pattern of anti-consumer practices and questionable business tactics, not only towards the fans and gamers, but also towards their own employees and acquired studios. And here's the irony of it all. Rewinding to 1986, to Bethesda's inception, way before Elder Scrolls, Christopher Weaver, its founder, led Bethesda to develop Gridiron, the first sports game to feature a physics engine, a groundbreaking innovation that caught EA's attention, eventually approaching Bethesda to help EA craft what would eventually become the Madden NFL franchise. In exchange, EA would publish Gridiron. But Electronic Arts had other plans. They exploited Bethesda's technology and abandoned the deal, which led to a $7.2 million lawsuit that Bethesda ultimately settled. In a twist of fate, the bullied became the bully. As Robert Altman and ZeniMax took control, Bethesda slowly transformed into the very entity it once fought against, emboldened by success and unbound by accountability. And that's not even counting the myriad of other lawsuits I didn't include in this video. Meanwhile, the future of Bethesda Game Studios remains uncertain, now under Microsoft's ownership. How will Bethesda evolve in this ever-changing industry? Will they rise to the occasion, embracing innovation and reclaim their place at the forefront of gaming with Elder Scrolls 6? Has that bridge been burned? Or will they continue down the path of stagnation and regression, becoming a relic of a bygone era? Only time will tell. Thank you for watching.